Good morning, everyone. It's a real privilege to moderate this panel, and I want to thank, of course, Admiral Fogo, the entire CMS team, and the Naval War College Foundation for making this all possible. And I'm really regretting that I have to follow up as the first very quick speaker after the VCNO, because it's a hard act to follow, as always. Admiral Colorado reminds us that the Foundry is a place where every ounce of sea power we wield originates. Without a strong Foundry, said repeatedly in his various sea notes, there is no fleet, and there's certainly no fight. Across the sea notes, the CNO has issued since taking office. His message has been remarkably clear and consistent. I think Admiral Kilby emphasized this in his remarks. The Foundry isn't a metaphor. It's the Navy's engine. And this panel has represented some key aspects of the Foundry. And I think that's going to make this a particularly outstanding contribution to this entire day. The Foundry is where sailors, civilians, shipbuilders, engineers, technologists, logisticians, schoolhouses, depots, the entire shore establishment in many ways, turns raw inputs into ready outputs, trains people, deployable platforms, and sustained readiness at scale. As C-No 2 puts it, the Foundry builds, generates, sustains, and modernizes naval power. In my reading, this is not abstract. It is meant to guide real decisions. Again, I think, I'm almost repeating what Admiral Kilby said, but that's not a bad thing because I wrote these before I heard his speech. It guides real decisions about where to invest, where to reform, how to tighten the connective tissues between the Navy and industry. Today's panel brings together three leaders who sit at the center of the Foundry, at the center of a national level set of national level problems: industrial capacity, modernization, labor force development, and speed. Our panelists today are living and shaping these imperatives. As we've already heard from Admiral Fogo, Vice Admiral Moore, who in some ways needs no introduction from me, but I just want to note one of the unique parts of his role is he's been on both sides in a very deep way. Leading Naval Sea Systems Command, but now at Huntington Ingalls Industry. He sees the problem from a multi-dimensional perspective that I think is incredibly valuable. Mike Coulter, who I learned recently, I met way back in the day when I was working for Admiral Mullen and Roughhead doing CS-21, a very long time ago in the lifespan of Washington, the Navy. He's a CNO, President CNO of Highway Defense USA, leads a global company and a global spanning many nations, including our own, at the forefront of bringing foreign investment, monies, technology, knowledge, know-how, support of allies to Philadelphia and beyond. And I think that's, again, something that's a really valuable perspective as the President talks about restoring maritime dominance, and there's a big quickening amongst all of us as navalists. Having that representative who's really leading these efforts from the outside is important. And finally, of course, is George Matafis, the CEO of Fincantieri Marine Group, who brings deep experience leading industrial transformation, managing production lines, and executing shipbuilding programs under demanding timelines. Lastly, and I've already talked far longer than I should have, forgive me for that. You know what, I'm going to stop. I have questions, but I'm going to save them for the end. I think it's better to actually hear from my betters. So we'll take it in order of where you appear in the panel. Everybody's going to have 5 or 7 minutes. I'll tee up a few questions to talk about as Admiral Fogo did, and then we'll take questions from the audience. I am not going to try to wrangle a Kindle or whatever was being used to gather. Unless you tell me to, I'm going to raise your hand in the Q&A part, and we'll take it the old-fashioned way. So, without further ado, is it Admiral Moore first?
Oh, okay. Well,
I had you first on my list, but okay.
There, can you hear Mike? Okay. Well, speaking's never been my problem, so that's fine. Well, we can start with me. I actually sat down in the end thinking I would be the third person to talk. But, Admiral Fogo, thank you for the invite. What we do here in these discussions are incredibly important. I'm looking forward to hearing the discussion this morning and really enjoyed hearing Admiral Kilby's remarks this morning. I think the topic of future fleet is incredibly important. I'm a shipbuilder for all my life, so I'm excited about what's ahead. But I want to provide a couple of remarks and maybe a little bit of a cautionary tale. So first of all, I'm very encouraged by what's coming out with the transformation that they're talking about in acquisition. A lot of good things that came out from Secretary Hex's speech. The devil is going to be in the details. I'm a big proponent of this concept of portfolio and acquisition executive. I'm a big proponent of giving more authority to program managers to move money around, make technical decisions. I'm a big proponent of we don't need to get to 100% of whatever is in every contract, and that there may be better ways to get things delivered on schedule. I can probably think of about 20 or 30 times that I butted heads with DOT&E when I was a program manager and a PEO, and I wish I'd had those authorities. So I think there's a lot of good to come out of that. I'm encouraged by that. But I'd also say, if you look back in history over the past 50 or 60 years, there's probably been 20 to 25 major defense acquisition reforms. We've had 15 or so new secretaries of defense in that time frame. And I think you'd be hard pressed to say in the last 50 or 60 years whether anything has significantly changed in the way we do acquisition or anything we've done to improve. So my message there is that organization changes I think are important, but an organization change by itself is not going to fix this. And I think at the end of the day, we're going to be willing to recognize that it's going to go a lot deeper than making organizational changes, and just the organizational changes by itself are not going to get us there. As I look at acquisition reform over the last 50 or 60 years, there are 3 or 4 major things that pop into my head that have to be fixed. One, I think, and this is we're going to try and get after this, is the tenure. Industry has a lot more experience. They have people that have been doing this for a longer period of time. So the concept of getting a program manager or a PA in there and staying for longer periods of time, I think, makes eminent sense. The way that we budget today is clearly not optimal, in particular in the shipbuilding world. I think we're going to have to go really get after that in terms of providing stable, predictable budgets to industry. Continuing resolutions kill us. The pace of technology change today is much greater than it's been, and our appetite for what we want on these ships is sometimes greater than we can provide. And you only have to look at LCS and DDG 1000 and in some instances Constellation to see where that proves out. And then I think the other thing is that we've got to be willing to, once you sign these contracts, to stick with a stable design and stay with it. Once ink dries on these contracts, our desire to change those immediately really causes us significant problems. If we're not willing to tackle those things, in addition to this acquisition reform, we're never going to get there. And then the other thing I would point out is this goes a lot deeper than just how we're organized. There's a lot on the table today. The Ships for Americas Act. Should we be using foreign shipbuilders to help us out? I think we should explore anything and everything that's going to increase the pace of shipbuilding. But I would harken you back to a day in the late 80s, 90s, when we were actually delivering ships at scale. We were delivering 5 aircraft carriers in 17 years. We'll deliver the next 4 in 30 years. At the time, Electric Boat delivered 18 Ohio-class submarines in 19 years. And it'll be almost 30 years before we deliver the next ballistic missile submarine. Between Newport News and Electric Boat, we delivered 45 Los Angeles-class submarines in a span of, we were delivering almost 4.5 per year, and we're struggling today to get to 1.2. So you have to ask yourself, what's different? It's kind of interesting. The shipyards themselves are probably more modernized and complex than they were 25, 30 years ago. And I think what the big difference is the workforce. The workforce back then was stable. We had stable, predictable plans. We built things that industry knew was going to happen. And we had a workforce that had done this for long periods of time. I'll give you a data point. Ingalls Shipyard, back in 1994, the average electrical supervisor had been there for 23 years, the supervisor. Today, the average electrical supervisor at Ingalls has been there 5 years. So you have supervision that's not been there nearly as long, and you can imagine what that means about the people that are not the supervisors, the journeymen that have just started. We have got to get back to a point where we have stable, predictable workload, allow the shipyards to hire, allow the shipyards to train people, and if you do that, I think you'll start to see the throughput get back to where we were in the 90s. We have done, on the nuclear side of the house, we've pretty much done a stable design on aircraft carriers. We continue to change the design of the Virginia class. It's going to be a challenge for us. And on the surface side of the house, it pains me as a former surface nuclear trained officer, we've been unable to decide what we want. And frankly, the reason we continue to build Flight 3 DDGs, which are fantastic ships, is because we have continued to want to build bigger, more powerful ships and pay less for them. So there's a little bit of cost realism here too. So I look forward to the discussion and your questions today, but I wanted to lay out some of the challenges that I see today in the future fleet. And we've got to get after those things if we really want to get to the size of the fleet that we want going forward.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. It's a real honor to be here. Admiral Fogo, AB, thanks so much for organizing this, and to the Foundation in particular, congratulations. 4 or 5 years ago, started on this journey, and congratulations on what you've accomplished. This is amazing, so well done, and George and team too. It may take just a minute to orient people as that we're the new kid on the block, clearly, a little bit to who Hanwha is and what we're doing, but then weave in some of the comments that Tom made. So for those of you not familiar with Hanwha, I know it's getting a lot of press these days, but leading aerospace and defense company in Korea. Everybody's talking about shipbuilding right now, but for reference, VCNO talked about the missiles and some of the gap we have there as well. We actually started in that space 70 years ago. So what you think of in us at shipbuilding, we have very similar capabilities on the missile side, the artillery side. Sort of the common underpinning of a lot of what you see in not just Hanwha, but Korean defense companies is it's a country that's been on war footing for 70 years. It's also a country that is competing against very highly subsidized Chinese companies. And it's also a country that has a declining workforce, right? So that has caused Korean companies and Hanwha to invest in ways that in just other countries, other nations, other areas haven't had to do to try to compete and try to survive in that environment. And a little bit about Hanwha. More specific to Hanwha and less Korean defense companies, when Hanwha first contacted me 2 years ago, they had a desire to grow globally, but as we came through that journey of discussion, it became clear that what the market demand wasn't just selling. It was creating, customers were demanding sovereign presence. So I joined Hanwha with that understanding, that Hanwha's intent is to become a global aerospace and defense company, to evolve from being a leading aerospace and defense company in Korea to being a global aerospace and defense company, and to do that by creating sovereign presence in core markets. So you may not be familiar, but in Australia, we've created a factory, we've moved IP, and we're building howitzers and infantry fighting vehicles with 1,000 Australian workforce in Australia. A similar story in Poland, where we have factories and are building howitzers and munitions in Poland. The Polish then have been using that to support Ukraine. So very proud of the efforts that we have going in Europe as well. But the U.S. is the focus of our efforts, which is why I pivoted positions a week and a half ago to go from being a global lead to being a Defense USA lead. And just to be clear in this room, our intent is to become American. We're very proud of our acquisition of Philly Shipyard, the home of the Navy, the home of shipbuilding in the United States that's hit a rough patch. When we acquired Philly in December, we were, I think, at about 900 workers. A couple years prior to that, before the NSMV contracts, it was down. It was almost going out of business. I think there was a point where there were like 8 people on the rolls. I'm proud to tell you today there's 2,200 workers in Philly. And we are in the process of taking all of that technology, all of that innovation from Korea and bringing it to Philly Shipyard. Unfortunately, the great Philly Shipyard that was Philly Shipyard has been eaten away. That we had a lot of other tenants on the previous shipyard, so it turns out that one of the toughest challenges in Philly is actually footprint. So we have active discussions going with state, local governments, both in Pennsylvania, but New Jersey and other regional, so how we can create sort of a federated shipyard in Philly. If we are successful, we have an audacious plan, which is to go from where we are today, about building 1 to 1.5 ships a year, to building 20. And people laugh when we say that. It's not frigates, but
not aircraft carriers.
Not aircraft carriers. Although we have discussions with Gunnington Ingalls right now about how we can build modules for your aircraft carriers, which we'd be very happy to do. But people laugh when we say that, but in Korea, we're doing 50 ships a year. And in our 1 yard. So we believe it's possible if we transfer the automation, if we transfer the technology, if we build the workforce. If I could spend a moment on workforce. So we have gone from 900 to 2,200 people in Philadelphia, and we have not seen the headwinds that some of our peers are seeing. I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One of them is just location. We're not competing in some areas where it's much harder to compete on the workforce. The other area is we have a training pipeline that envisions people going from blue-collar work and upskilling them. So it is a union workforce. We have extremely strong support from the union, not only because we're growing jobs, but because our training pipeline is upskilling and automation. And as we've brought people from Philadelphia to Korea, and they see still welders, still all of that, but they also see Koreans holding an iPad that are operating 30 robots doing welding and doing cutting. They get excited about that. The younger workforce that tends to like being on iPads gets really excited about the idea that one day, as we bring that into the United States, we may be able to be part of that. So. We've been very honored to be hosting a lot of people. I tell people I'm a part-time tour guide at our shipyard in Korea. Our intent is to recreate that capacity. So in the United States, Philadelphia, geographically restricted, we're going to do everything we can there, but we do have ambitions further. So we've been actively seeking partnerships. As early as January, we were in seeing Admiral Kilby and General Dynamics and others. We've been talking to Fincantieri and Huntington Ingalls about how we can help as a module block supplier, as our intent is to bring foreign direct investment, bring technology, increase capacity here in the United States. So thank you very much for the time and look forward to the questions.
Sound check? Okay. On my end, thank you, Admiral Fogo, the Center, and Naval Border College for the invite. As I got the invite, I was thinking, okay, why are we here? And it started to dawn on me, okay? We're here, first of all, because I feel strongly that in times like this, it needs all of us and more. So this is not a I win, you lose situation. We're also here because we, on the Fincantieri side, we started this journey more than 15 years ago when the U.S. shipbuilding renaissance was not even an afterthought or a thought in many people's minds. And since then, we've walked the walk. We feel proud that now we have a full set of Tier 1 shipbuilding capabilities and capacities in place out there in the Great Lakes. And I feel that has a lot of lessons to share, a lot of lessons to pass on. Because it's not always it's a bumpy ride. So we're also here because I feel that I need to address the elephant in the room. We're here because obviously we started as pioneers also. That's how we feel, at least at the start of the Constellation class journey, because that journey indicated a shift, a change. The point was to pick up a proven design that met, exceeded requirements and objectives, and in that way go straight into construction. Rapid delivery. A lot of things that we're saying now, and we get them echoed through the entire administration, were the intent of that program as well. And so there's a lot of lessons to be learned out of the 4 last years of that journey and to be passed on. Lastly, on my end, I think we're here also because I'm here because Fincantieri Global continues to work with an eye into the future. There's a lot of technological innovation both in the process, so in the production side, as well as the product itself. And that jives in 2 ways. One is things that, like Michael said, he has intended to do. I've already started. We have initiated a lot of things that we have brought over as proven technology for the production side, whether it's exoskeletons, cobots, digital tools, AR and VR environments that allow things like concepts like digital twin. They're already here and we're expanding them. And also at the same time, I'm excited that having spent some time now over at the global headquarters to see a lot of things that go well with what Secor was indicating last time he gathered us to talk about his revised approach, which was come to me with good ideas and good products, and I've seen a lot of them from across the ocean right now that we can bring in, showcase to the Navy and to the Department of War, and then run all together. So that makes it an exciting time for us, no matter what the bumps are in the road, and no matter what other roller coaster ride we have to face. So Fincantieri has the full set of capabilities, and at the same time, obviously, okay, this is not Shadow. Anyway, not here. I was front row and center to hear SecNav showcase the shift from his desired shift from the Constellation class to a different platform, to the NSC platform. Not here to challenge that, obviously. I feel that there's always time to go and build the original design, Constellation, and a very clear design that is easy to build and has a lot of the goodness that has been voiced all around. And like I said, we need us and more. So, but that said, ready to answer the calling that the nation is throwing at us and deliver vessels that will be ready to serve the warfighter.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your remarks. I'll have a few questions of my own, and then we'll open it up. So please be ready, willing, and able to ask some good questions for our panel. I'm going to begin with sort of low-hanging fruit, not because the problem is low-hanging, but because the theme is ran across all three of our panelists. Let's talk a little bit about workforce development. It's a perpetual problem for defense industries in general, in fact, for manufacturing in the United States. More broadly. Can you talk a little bit beyond what you've already said about your own firm's activities and successes and maybe some failures with workforce development, and talk about how state and local governments and the national governments can be partners with your firms and with your sector in providing the sort of skilled workers, skilled engineers necessary to begin, but also to be sustained over time. Are there things that can be done at the national level or at the state and local level where you're located that would ease the burden on the firm in providing for the sort of workforce we need in the long run? Because my reading, and I think many of our readings, is that great power competition is not going to be over in 2 years. This is something that's going to be with us for certainly the rest of most of the graybeards, including myself, and this for the rest of our lives. So can you talk about workforce development from a broader perspective?
Yeah, just a couple comments. One, I agree with you 100%. And this is, the workforce development issue is not unique to the maritime industry. I mean, this is a national issue. You all have to just go look at Boeing or Intel or Pickett. We have actually had a decline in manufacturing capability in this country over the last 20, 25, 30 years. And it's borne out in that people would rather work at Starbucks or Target or work from home than they would rather be a welder or a manufacturer. I read a study the other day that if you became an electrician at age 18 years old, you'd make as much money as somebody who went to medical school and became a general practitioner by the time they were 65. So I do think that the conversation in the country has changed, and that we now know that we need to get people back, and that maybe going to four-year college is not for everybody. I think you would see the shipyards themselves have worked pretty hard. They all have apprentice schools. They work pretty closely with their states. But I'm encouraged that at the national level, I think you did this right, that we're investing money in the maritime industrial base, and that's a great start. The other thing I think is the recognition that, and you hit it on a little bit on Philadelphia, is that you can't bring the workers to where you're doing the work. Take the work to where the workers are. And so I think we're thinking differently about it. Distributed shipbuilding is a way for us to move some of the work out. And so you're seeing a movement to let's put work where there is workforce available and where there might be more blue-collar workforce. So I think on a national level, what they were doing in the maritime industrial base and a recognition that we ought to go train people around the country and not necessarily have to move them to the shipyards is the way we have to go going forward.
Yeah, as we used to say, I'd associate myself with all those comments. But maybe a couple things to be additive to that. We had Admiral Fogo in our yard in Korea a month or two ago, or a few months ago, and was asking for observations on workforce. And it struck me when VCNO Kilby was talking earlier today about the culture in some of our public shipyards in the United States. One of the comments that Jamie made, which struck me, and that I've seen starting to play out in Philadelphia, is that there's a different culture in the workforce in Korea that you don't just accept that a schedule is going to slip, and it's really, really noticeable. They are going to go to the problem and they are going to attack it. And if it's an extra shift, if it's a problem supplier, they go after it with passion and enthusiasm. One of the things that we've been doing to try to create the workforce in Philadelphia is to take our master shipbuilders and actually even our retired master shipbuilders out of our yard in Korea and bring them over to do training. We're doing the same thing the other way around. But one of the things that we're seeing is sort of the cultural piece of the workforce and getting after the problem and the schedule slip. On the state and regional, we're really, really lucky. We have incredible support from state and regional, from technical colleges, universities. We have a great apprentice program. That's another place where we're using our master shipbuilders from Korea to develop. So I do think there's leveraging that piece to it as well. And I do come back to the automation. I do believe that we need to do everything we can with the MIB and technical universities and all that, but the kids want to be on iPads and they want to be playing with technology. So if we can provide, if not at first, a path where the workers can upskill to a point where 20, 30 years from now, they're not standing outside all day long in the cold trying to battle, but are instead some way working with automation, that there's a piece to that both incentivizes and pulls that workforce in and then allows us to get at a vexing problem.
I just realized I'm gonna go third every time.
You anticipated that I'm going to switch it up in the next question.
Yeah.
I'm going to go from my left.
This was the right seat.
So with that said, and not trying to echo all the good things that my fellow panelists threw out there. In our case, we had a few things going on. One was that while early on post-COVID, we did have a lot of challenge attracting talent. I don't even would to not, but I'm gonna say that the last 10, 12 months, it's been working well in terms of showing resurgence of interest to bringing folks. So we've been ramping up in terms of the people we have in our yards right now, having more than 3,000 in the system of yards out there in Wisconsin. So how we embraced that was threefold. One was finding ways to make life around the shipyard better. Feel strong that it's a matter of, you're talking about young folks with young families coming in. You need to try and put in place also in the surrounding environment, all those little things that we may take for granted for them it will make them, their wives, their families to feel this is a life I can live. This is the type of life I can stay here for decades on. So we worked a lot, much like Michael was indicating, looking into both state, local, but also MIB initiatives through which to actually trigger that type of environment. Like I said, daycare centers, malls, that type of local and regional community development, and it has been working. The second was also, much like Michael is indicating, I have the luxury to lean on a network, a worldwide network of expertise. So we've been bringing in about 30, 40 experts, each one on their specific classes, whether it's from Norway, whether it's from Italy or elsewhere. So those folks have the opportunity to learn from the best. They appreciate that. We see how the craftsmen are saying, okay, wait a minute, I'm getting taught something different here. So you touch on the young folks before they become stubborn shipbuilders that know better.
Yeah.
To show them the best way to do things, the new way to do things. And that's where the third thing kicks in, which is indeed innovation and automation. When I came back to Fingertier, I loved the fact that we were converging towards bringing a geek and a welder and forming them into one. Because now we've already been applying this in our shipyards. We're bringing in, like I said, cobots, where you have that same guy that is welding, then for a moment pausing, picking up the tablet, and with that tablet operating the cobot and suddenly feeling part of the future, not part of the present, but part of the future. And I think that also resonates with today's youth and today's young generations. So if you complete all these three elements together, and to go back to what was also asked about local, state, yes, the Great Lakes offer that opportunity even further, because we can touch on the entire Midwest area there that has tradition for manufacturing. So you don't have to find shipbuilders. You can break down the work and allow folks that are good at building pipe spools build pipe spools. Folks that are good at doing specific machinery work or assemblies to do that, and then through that create a force multiplier. We all know there were the executive orders early on that talked about maritime prosperity zones. A great idea, great concept. We're looking to try and do more on that. And lastly, state, local, MIB. I think MIB is also a very noble cause the way it started, and we need to give it our attention so as to help that team grow more. It's a team that, as far as I understand, transitioned coming out of the need for submarine support, submarine construction support. It now looks to look 360 into our sector. It's worth helping them and reinforcing that initiative and allowing it to be the vessel through which shipbuilders' thoughts and ideas flourish and get support to become reality.
Thank you again for the excellent answers to my question, and I think we actually can learn quite a bit from the responses. I'm going to throw away my script a little bit. And Admiral, don't panic. I'm not going to go off too off script, but I think this is so far listening, we've heard we're all in this together. We're working hard to resolve not only the U.S. national problems in shipbuilding, but also at a global scale amongst allies and partners. But I want to remind everybody, and then hear from our panelists, that this is actually a private marketplace. These are private firms having to make a profit, respond to shareholders, respond to family, respond to other units within larger industrial concerns. Well, one of the things we know about the current environment is that non-traditional defense industries, and potentially shipbuilders, and certainly in the UAV sector, are now entering the marketplace. Anduril, for example. What is your response to this new competitive environment? Third-tier shipbuilders, Andurils, potential competitors from other countries in the globe that may have something to offer in shipbuilding. How do you respond to that? How do you feel about it as a competitor? Is there enough for all?
First one, sorry. You answer for it.
Well, now. No, kidding aside, we're looking into those areas as a group. Fingertier Global is looking into those areas on our own. We recognize noble efforts from the new primes, as you would call them, whether it's Saronic, Anduril, and what have you, and their attempts to be fully vertical and produce. At the moment when we will need volume and speed, on our end we want to be ready to deliver. So we are already in discussions with other players that seek to focus mainly on the easy stuff, the software and the autonomy, and leave the hard part of bending steel or working with composites on us. So that we can hone in on those level of capabilities and then offer our capacity when the time comes that it is needed. That said, like I said before, On our end, Ficadelia Global is already working also products themselves. So soon enough, our intent is to come over to SecNav, to Secor, and lay those out in the same way, like I said, that Secretary Hexeth proposed the other day, and see where that takes us, because I still say this thing needs all of us and more.
I guess a couple of reactions. One, it's always a good idea to follow where the customer's going, and we hear from the customer that there's an appetite for alternatives or additional players in the space. So I think that that's the direction we're heading in, and it's understandable why, given some of the challenges we've had in shipbuilding. So that's one comment. The second comment, I guess, particular to Hanwha is, yes, we're a big company that does all the hard stuff on building ships, but is that the question, or is it how you behave? So do we think of ourselves as Hanwha as a constructive disruptor that's adding to the pace, that's willing to invest ahead of need, that's willing to bring innovative technology, that's willing to bring private investment? Yeah, that's sort of how we think about ourselves. So maybe we're more like Andrew than others. It's sort of, a lot of it comes in behavior. I haven't gone into too much detail about Hanwha, but we have Hanwha Ocean, which is our shipbuilding. We have Hanwha Systems, which is defense electronics, and they're doing all the autonomy AI work with the Korean government for Korean space. So we have the ability to play in sort of the automation place. But that said, our intent here in the United States is to become American. So we are moving out to partner with a lot of these companies already. I mean, we've spent time, it's already been announced that we have a partnership with Havoc AI, a great company up right by Naval War College, to bring sort of disruptive unmanned surface vessel capacity. We have a partnership with General Atomics, where both the US and Korea were developing next generation UAVs. We will be announcing some things on the UUV space. So I don't think it's an either or. I think that the customer is demanding more speed, more investment, quick action to increase the pool of capabilities for the US warfighter, and we're on board.
Yeah, I would agree with, I can now see what you guys did before, I can agree with what my panelists just said. Look, competition's a great thing. I don't think anybody can argue that the results that we're delivering today are where they need to be. And so if somebody else wants to enter the market and they've got better ideas, great. We welcome the competition. You may have read a Wall Street Journal article this weekend about Andrew. And I'm not here to pick on Andrew or Saronic and stuff. They certainly have operated under a different business model. But sometimes, my motto is, it seems too good to be true. It probably is. And so I think we have to be careful. Ukraine, everyone wants use Ukraine as kind of the vignette for but it's, what we've done in Ukraine with unmanned UAS is completely different from what we're talking about in the maritime domain in a China fight. And eventually, at the end of the day, it comes down to, do you have product in the water and does it work for the warfighter? And so I think, we'll see going forward. I think the competition is terrific. I think we bring, some of the, major defense primes are going to bring a lot to the table that, a lot of people are going to want the company that built goggles for Microsoft. But at the end of the day, we're not talking about a 3D video game. We're talking about warfighting. And so I think that competition is going to be good. But and I would say on our side of the fence that we welcome the competition, and I think it will be good for everybody.
Great. I want to leave plenty of time for the audience. Do we have enough for one or two more from me, or we want to switch out?
Yeah, you're at 10:15. You've got till 10:45.
Okay. My watch died this morning. That's why I'm asking.
I got you back.
Thank you. So I want to continue with the theme of competition, but I want to switch the competition. Excuse me. I want to switch the competition to the global security environment. Are there things we can learn from our competitor in the pacing threat in the old jargon from China, who obviously has outpaced many of our countries, at least in commercial and naval shipbuilding, frankly? Is there something about the way they're approaching the game that all of us can learn from? And I'm reminded that, you know, something was an anathema when I was in grad school and a young professor. Industrial policy isn't back in fashion. And people are actually advocating, well, maybe we need to imitate some of the things that Chinese have done with chips, AI, and so on and so forth. What do you think, from an industry perspective, there is to take away, if anything, from the Chinese approach to shipbuilding?
Well, if you work in a communist country and you're completely subsidized by the government, it's a lot easier to build
Good answer.
ships fast. Look, they're building a lot of ships. There's no doubt about that. And you know, quantity has a quality all of its own. You know, I go back to some of the things they talked about earlier in automation and some of the things that the Koreans are doing. There are things that we can learn from Japanese, from the Koreans, perhaps from the Chinese, and how we build ships, and we ought to be, you know, we ought to be incorporating that into how we build ships. You know, I would just give you, you know, a couple of examples though of, you know, of our shipbuilding. I would, those examples would be Cole, Princeton, Fitzgerald, McCain, San Francisco, Connecticut, go on and on and on. Now, these are warships that have been out and either been hit by a mine or been in a major collision, and in each and every one of those cases, those ships with a minimal loss of life has come back to port and been able to continue to fight. And I think, you know, we have to keep that in mind. You know, our warships are built to a different standard than anybody else in the world builds them, and I don't know that we want to sacrifice that just because the Chinese are building things faster than we are.
Yeah, so how do I answer that, Tom? Let me see how I can be additive to Tom's comments. Not just Hama, but Korean and Japanese shipyards are competing every single day in the commercial space with Chinese shipyards. So I think Hanwha and our partners probably have something to add just from how we're competing. The political environment aside, when you're a communist country and you can subsidize everything, but there are ways to compete against that. I mean, Korean and Japanese shipyards are competing, and with highly subsidized Chinese shipyards, and they're doing that through national investment, certainly, but then also automation and fighting hard. We have seen the Chinese make advances on the commercial side, but they're still not the best. Korean, Japanese shipyards are doing advanced things that China aspires to do, like advanced LNG tankers that we're building in our yards that they aspire to do, but they can't do there yet. So they're not the 50-foot giant, I think, that some people are making them out to be. I don't know how that translates to the military side, but I can assume how that translates to the military side. Tom, on your comment on what their capabilities are and capabilities aren't. The one last comment I would make, and this may be a little bit controversial, is in your former NAVC hat in the comment that you made, if we're going to put our sailors out on ships, then particularly combatants, then they absolutely need to be the best ship in the world and to keep our sailors safe. For some of the other things that we're building, is our risk tolerance at the right place for building ships, and can we learn on certainly unmanned but optionally manned or auxiliaries or oilers, or do we have the risk tolerance rate to get to the speed and pace? I think that's a question we should be asking ourselves.
You started your question with global. I'll take it back to that because we need to be more agile in recognizing goodness in global, starting with our allies and then bringing it over. I'll give you an example that obviously I know about. Fincantieri in Italy delivers 5 cruise ships a year. And people don't realize, but a cruise ship is similar in tonnage and complexity to an aircraft carrier. And they have plans now to deliver 8 to 10, 8 in the next year and going to 10 next. So we're talking about folks that know how to increase that throughput and match the demand. On top of that, you heard me say complex, because it's not the same saying, oh, the Chinese are cranking out, thousands of tankers a year, which are, as our global CEO likes to say, shoe boxes, because that complexity is intricate on making sure that you recognize it and you handle it. But that's that's the real point. We have said many times, it has become a tagline, you know, allow commercial standards or open up to these type of things and through that allow innovation to bleed into the Navy and the naval vessels. We need to move from words into actions even further. There's a lot to be learned from across the ocean, and especially from our allies. And we can, if we become agile and open to take in and accept, then there's only goodness, I think, in front of us. The last thing I want to say on the China aspect is it's a minor thing, so it's not about bending steel. But every time you talk to me about volume in China, I always come back to the thought that China is also generating about 10,000 naval engineers a year. And how many are we generating? 100? I think not even more. So while we will crank on to build up more hardware, we need to work even more on the people, and I'm not talking just a pure workforce, talking also about the expertise, the things that will drive us, also in terms of innovation, also in terms of design, also in terms of all the things that are paramount, you know, in actually to deliver on schedule and a lot.
Thank you. I'm going to take one, maybe two more questions, open it up, and then we'll have save rounds from everybody in the panel. Again, going off script. You use the term metal bedding, and that's come up a number of times in bending steel. Some pundits, some reporters talk as if the platform, the hull, is just a big box and you stuff it full of it. And in some ways, that's simplistically true. But we all know that stuffing a hull filled with systems, combat systems, weapons systems, communication systems, and so forth, is a very complex endeavor. How do you all think about systems integration at the platform level, at the battle group level, at the joint force level, and potentially in cases where there's allies and competitors, allies and coalitions, the will in NATO in Asia? It may seem like a question of why do we want to talk to shipbuilders about this, but it begins with that box, and it begins with creating the space and the place and the capacity and the power systems that are required. Not everybody has to answer this question, but if any of you have any thoughts on the questions of integration and you work with other suppliers, other vendors, the Navy itself, to fill the hull. Does anybody want to grapple with that one?
Let me just, talking from an industry perspective, we have both in Europe and other places been facing competitors, in my view, protectionist competitors, who throw this up as a challenge. I actually don't see it as a challenge. I mean, the Korean ships that Jamie knows well, we've been visiting, have Aegis on them. I mean, it's integrated, it's done. I don't see a huge challenge to this. On the Army side, it may surprise people, but the most proliferated howitzer in Europe is actually the Hanwha K9 howitzer. Everybody in the northern and eastern flank is using it, and they're interoperable with U.S. and NATO forces. Just one observation is that I actually think if the government sets a standard that says we need to be interoperable, industry can figure that out. With the companies are getting really good at this. There's ways to do it. We have partnerships with companies around the world to solve that. So if it's an interoperability issue for the customer, we'll solve it.
Is that enough for you guys on that, or does somebody else want to weigh in?
Nobody wants to build.
It was a poorly phrased question. I'm sorry to do that.
No, on one hand, it feels like you're reading my global CEO's mind, because it was 2 weeks ago I was there and he was laying out to me one of our strategic lines that would be to not to change swim lanes, but to delve into the system integration piece, so as to be ready to talk more and interact more with our partners in crime, in this case, the system integrators. On the other hand, it's true that you see us being hesitant because on our end we're just trying to make sure we deliver the right HMNE platform all around. And it's more important to us looking into those portions of the software and how they connect with elements like Aegis or what have you. So, yeah, I wouldn't want to intrude into that sphere right now.
Okay, last thing for me, this is a standard question, but I think sometimes it can allow us to make some news, or maybe not, if you choose to decline the opportunity. If you could change one or two things of whatever sort, political, legislative, budgetary, financial, inter-alliance aspects of the shipbuilding sector in general, what are the things you would change first? What are your priorities? And I say change for the better, to make you more profitable, to increase speed, to increase quality, to improve innovation.
Let me first digest the question, make sure I'm answering the right way. First, I'll say on our end. On our end, like I was saying, we have set up. It goes back to something that has been talked about a lot, which is steady demand signals. And I'll be that selfish moment in time because it's about us having already, like I said, having laid out a set of tier 1 shipbuilding capabilities and capacities that now have honed in on, after years of working on it, have mastered serial production. And that is an additional virtue that is easy to lose and tough to build up. And I'm talking about not just one yard, but the system of yards that we have out there in Wisconsin. So it's key for us to lean on that type of a steady demand signal. Of course, I'm going back to the elephant in the room right now, and people have seen the SECNAV's statements about, opening up to transition projects so that type of asset that has been built up in the Great Lakes region doesn't get jeopardized. And whether it's whatever was mentioned, amphibians, ice breaking, or cable layers, or all units that are necessary for our Navy's needs, much like VCNO was pointing out also earlier today. We're ready to answer that call as long as it's a sort of a steady demand line, so that it allows us to continue developing further that serial production virtue that I mentioned. Also, of course, back of my mind is when you have set up that type of an asset that is ready to tackle complex platforms like surface combatants, you should keep that in mind when you want to optimize, no matter which choice you make in terms of design or platform. That said, on top of that, for the entire industry, I would go with cultural, especially, and I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I'm seeking in terms, sorry to talk on behalf of the industry, but I feel like we've seen the intent to work on policy, to work on organization, with all the moves that have taken place and the ones that are upcoming. It's key to see how that gets executed and cascades all the way down to the full organization, whether it's DOW or the Department of the Navy. So that's why I ping on culture, so that the noble intents that we have heard about become real as they get cascaded down to every layer that we have to interact with on that end.
Maybe one strategic and one tactical. On the strategic side, I couldn't agree more from an industry perspective. It's about demand signal. To be clear, I believe that we build the best ships and submarines in the world in the United States, but we're not able to scale it because we don't have a steady demand signal. And if you look at places in the world that are able to scale it, it's because there's a steady demand signal. And if you look at the best places in the world that are able to scale it, it's because there's a combined commercial and military ability to scale it, if it's cruise lines or if it's LNG and auxiliary. So to get where the U.S. is hoping to get, at a very high level, it would be steady demand signal and across naval and commercial. And you leverage all the benefit of a stable commercial base. I mean, if you look at our shipyard in Korea, it's 75%-ish commercial. And then you think about that from a from a U.S. standpoint, that's your base, right? So you're able to predict your workforce, you're able to predict your throughput. And as you get a frigate program, or you get a submarine program, or you get a whatever, then you still have the steady base. And if you want predictability and scale in the United States, then that's what you need. You need a steady commercial base, you need a steady demand signal. So I would comment that. And the more tactical comment I would make is, I actually wasn't too familiar with this until before joining Hanwha, but at Philly Shipyard, we do a lot of work, non-Navy work for customers like MARAD and others, NSMV ship. And I've gotten much more familiar with the Vessel Program Manager, the VPM model. But it is great. It is really, really great. And the VPM model essentially makes sure that you mostly lock in a design, and you're not having change order after change order. And last night, I guess, SecNav said he's going to have every Friday afternoon meeting where if you have a change order, it's going to come straight to his desk. But we've got 1,700 in SecNav's office, which
It's going to last a long time.
It's going to be a long, right? But the VPM model is a great model. And is that the model that you would want for your most advanced frigate or your most advanced Columbia submarine? Maybe not. But again, to the question on tolerance on risk on different platforms, could you expand the VPM model to auxiliaries and oilers and pick where you want to draw the line? That would give the ability to scale real quickly too. So 2 comments.
Yeah, if I could fix one thing, it would be cost realism. And a couple SNAs ago, I had one of the resource professors stood up and said, "We're going to build a bigger, faster, more powerful follow-on to DDG Flight 3, and it's going to cost less." And I remember thinking to myself, "What world do you live in?" And the problem is, look, and I've been in the resource sponsor shop. I've been on both sides of the fence. I understand the challenges with the budget, but the way we go about ships is. It's the opposite of the way we would go buy a car. Before you walk out the door to buy a car, the first thing you think is, how much do I want to pay for a car? And that determines whether you go to the Porsche dealer or to the Hyundai dealer. But that's not the way the Navy works. The Navy decides, I want the following things on my ship. It's like they would walk into the Porsche dealer and say, here's what I want. The Porsche dealer says, well, it sounds like you want a Porsche 911 GTS. Takes it over, and the Navy goes, whew, that's absolutely what I want. The Porsche dealer says, that's $450,000. The Navy says, well, I only have $120,000. The Porsche dealer is not going to say, let me see what I can do to get you into that car for $120,000. He's going to walk you down the street and say, we should look at the Cayman. Now, but that's the problem we face today. We're not willing to pay for the capability that we want, and neither is industry willing to upfront tell you, you can't have that for that price. And we get in this vicious cycle where we buy ships that we know, wink, wink, nod, nod, when we sign a contract, we're never going to get there, even if everything goes perfectly right. And then we get cost overruns, and it ruins the downstream budget. And there's a reason that none of these costs in these ships in the last couple of years have finished on time. And there's a reason that we ended up aborting Seawolf and Constellation and DDG 1000 and LCS, because in each and every one of those cases, we wanted more than we could afford. And at the end of the day, when the price didn't come where we wanted, we ended up canceling the ships, which has really destroyed the shipbuilding industrial base. I'll just say, because we're in this room, I'm sad that we canceled Constellation. We'll see where we're going to go next with this, but our ability on the service side of the house with truncating LCS, truncating DDG 1000, truncating Constellation, and now relying on DDG 51 Flight 3 to be the workhorse for another 20 years is really at the root cause of where the problems we have today. So first and foremost, I think the first thing is get the requirements you want, and then understand what you're willing to pay for. And if you can't afford that, then you're going to have to dial down the requirements. I'll say one more thing. I just had a conversation with someone in the Pentagon the other day on unmanned service vehicles, and he said to me, I'm struggling with this. And I said, what are you struggling with? He says, well, maybe someday we might want to have people on it. So I'm just wondering, maybe we should build an unmanned service vehicle with at least the capability to have 8 people on board. And I said to him, okay, as soon as you do that, I've got to add a berthing compartment, I've got to add chill water, I've got to add pot water, I've got to add a sewage system, I've got to add life rafts to go down the road. You just increase the cost of this platform by 25% because you might want it to do that 20 years down the road. So I think the biggest challenge we have out there is setting the requirements and understanding what that's going to cost.
Thank you very much. Okay, you all waited very patiently while I struggled through a few questions, and our panelists beautifully went through them. I'm going to take 2 or 3 questions and then allow our panelists to respond. I saw on the left, I saw this gentleman, and I saw that gentleman, then I'll go back around. Sir.
Thanks, Mitch Waldman, Naval War College Foundation. Thank you very much for great perspective. So your iron triangle of life is plant, so industrial capacity, workforce, people, and culture. I think in the middle of your triangle, just like in the middle of the Vice Chief's triangle, is the enabler of supply chain, right? Because you can optimize your triangle, and if you don't have a supply chain that can deliver on time, on budget, what we need, you got nothing. Right? You're not gonna win the product. So, can each of you kind of give a perspective of what you're seeing today with supply chain? There's a lot of concern about supply chain robustness, the ability for it to support mobilization surge. So even, again, if you right size and do everything you need, if the supply chain's not there, our ability to get capability and effects to the warfighter who's limited. And then Michael, I'll put you on the spot, and maybe George, you as well, because you have a view of an international supply chain. Right, so maybe a view of domestic supply chain, what you're seeing, and maybe a lesson learned for us next year, Jamie, is probably need a supply chain element as we think about the Foundry, because that's a key enabler. So I don't know, who wants to start on that? So domestic and then
Let's take, because we're running out of time, and I'm conscious of making sure people get it, let's take 2 more, and then you guys can answer whatever parts of
What we don't want to.
I know that's a great question. Who guys over here, sir?
Mike Mann, retired Navy guy. So you talked about the base. You have to have a base. And the beauty of Italy and South Korea, you've got that base. It's commercial. In our country, it's the Navy. We're the base. Should we be doing more? Maybe this is a question for you, Admiral. Should we be doing more, the administration be doing more, Congress doing more, to reestablish a commercial shipbuilding industry in the United States? We'll never solve this workforce development problem on the backs of Navy ships. We'll never solve these challenges that we have. Should we be doing more? And if you were king for a day, Admiral, what would you do?
1 more, and then we'll go back. Sir.
Yeah, good morning, Dave Hart from Deloitte. Secretary of War Hegseth has talked pretty vehemently about, quote, the right to repair, which is a restatement of the age-old debate about intellectual property. Who owns it, who doesn't? I'd like to get some comments with regard to where you see that particular issue proceeding forward.
Thank you, gentlemen. Pick and choose as you see fit.
I feel like I'm committed only to Mitch, so I don't have a choice here. On supply chains, much like you hinted, Fincantieri globally has an approach. It's creating ecosystems, it's creating hubs, and those can even cut across borders. Obviously, you start regional, national, and you go further, but it's about building up a full ecosystem of companies, and small, medium, and large. And we've attempted a mini-sized effort like that in our case, as we build up an ecosystem of such suppliers that span in multiple states, 43 at this point, but a lot of them, more than 300, are in the Great Lakes region, Wisconsin and Michigan. And we purposefully went on for folks that wanted to grow with us. So not necessarily just to the fully established player, but to spare more and more initiative, more work and spread the growth. Now that's a tricky thing when you don't have that steady demand that we were talking about, because those folks are the ones that will be agile, nimble, cost effective, and follow you down that road. But at the same time, they depend on you to a great extent. So we're not talking about like I said, the big players that are just a speck in their P&L. We're talking about folks that are investing with you to go with you on this journey. So I think it's a right way to go. So as to create more and more capacity, also in little things, whether it was pipe spools or what have you. But at the same time, it goes back to what we were talking about before. That contract with quotes with the Navy and others, that the demand will be there so we can keep that growth and not jeopardize that type of an initiative.
Just so on supply chain, again, looking to Korea and where I observe it, one of the most powerful things when you visit the Korean shipyards, if it's Hanwha or Samsung or Hyundai, is the geography and the location and then the supply chain that's built out around it. And one of the reasons that all of those shipyards are able to move so quickly and at scale is that the supply chain is all right there too, and the companies that we work with. We are at a much earlier stage in the United States than Finke Interior, certainly Huntington Ingalls, but we have the same view that in Philly we're going to be commercial and naval. We're going to need to build out a supply chain. We're trying to do as much we can regionally to do that. When you get into naval and across the United States, obviously the supply chain is not all geographically co-located, and there are reasons for that. Some congressional, some logistics, right? So it gets much more complicated. So we're eyes wide open to the scale of that problem. We are still coming through this in Philadelphia, but as a yard that so far has done largely commercial, we are able to leverage the strength of our global supply chain into some of the commercial work, which has allowed us to drive price down and cost down. That'll certainly be a different conversation when it comes to the naval side. And on to that point on the commercial side, absolutely, please. We are very strong advocates for the SHIPS Act, very strong advocates for creating strategic fleet, very strong advocates because the more you can do to create that commercial base, the demand signal, the industry will scale to fill that. I think I got it.
Okay, lightning round. So, Dave, great question. Right to repair, 100% on board with that. I was listening to the other Secretary of Senate was complaining that, hey, the sailors can't repair the ovens on Ford because industry has a contract to repair them. I would say industry has a contract to repair them because we don't know how to repair the ovens. And I think, your question gets down to, hey, are we going to reestablish SIMAs and RSGs and have sailors that can actually do the repair work? I think that's a key component that goes with that. Ships for America, 100% on board with it. I'm a big fan of it. I think you have to grow the industrial base. I think as we do this, and I'm not smart enough on the commercial side of how the government's going to subsidize this, I think we have to be careful that there's not unintended consequences in the early stages where we all of a sudden subsidize commercial work, raise those wages, and then all of a sudden lose workers from the ships that are built in the military side while we grow the workforce some. And then to your point, Mitch, on supply base, I don't think we pay enough attention to it. I was just down in Louisiana touring a metals factory down there, and they had a bunch of material that was left because Eastern canceled offshore patrol cutter they were trying to get reimbursed for. They had a bunch of things they were building for Finke Terry with Constellation that they're not going to lose. And I think we lose sight of the fact that the big primes, we don't like it when the demand signal changes, but we're able to absorb a lot of those changes a lot better than these second-tier suppliers are. And when these things happen, we absolutely crush them. 70% of the suppliers in the submarine industrial base today are sole source. If we don't get after that along with the primes and all this maritime industrial base funding, we're making a huge mistake.
Okay, I remember earlier today we talked about demerits of being late. I'm terrified of getting demerits even at my age. One question, and I want somebody with a big ego. Hunter, I'm seeing you. I'm sorry. To ask the question that takes us to the rest of the day. Make it a good one. Short, tight. I'm not necessarily going to answer it here, but we're going to think about it as we go through the day.
Thanks, Pete. Gentlemen, I want to talk specifically about surface combatants and get your opinion as the outside authority. We have a 30-year track record of failure, starting with DDG 1000, stopped at 2, LCS, retired early, CDX, never built because it was unaffordable, and now the frigate. So every major class of surface combatant, we have failed to have a successful production program. If you were giving the customer feedback, and now that we're about to embark on one, like DDGX, what would you tell us to do better? And I say us because everybody in OPNAM had some role, no drop of rain thinks it caused the flood. But what would you tell us to work on better in coming up with the next program?
Okay.
Requirement.
The time is short, so let's That's a great question. We should have spent more time on that than my questions. Let's come back to that over the course of lunch and the day, because I'm gonna turn this over to Adam Fogle. Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Take a step, because that's a great question.
Stable design with some technology. If you want new technology, build them up flights like your DDG is the most important thing going forward. But, we depend, and then I think industry's gotta do better job of going back and telling, somebody should have gone back and told CNO, hey, well, I know you want a 50 knot LCS, but the technology doesn't exist for that, and we're gonna take something off the shelf that we haven't used before. There's a lot of risk to that. And we're gonna build a big ship that's stealthy for naval gunfire support. I'm not sure what that mission was supposed to be in the end of the day, and we're gonna do that with a gun that we haven't really tested out yet. So are we sure this is the path that we want to go down? I think those are two instances. And then on the Constellation, industry wasn't clear enough, I think, nor was probably the acquisition committee with, hey, you say we're building a parent design, we're not really building a parent design. There are several things that we're going to have to change to meet U.S. standards, and I think we owe that to Navy leadership and those discussions if we want to get these things right going forward.
10 seconds from my side. From Korea, you lock in the spec and you charge for it and you do it. And if it's a commercial ship, if it's a naval ship, that's what you do. So that's a much abbreviated version to say the practice learned that we have in Korea is that you lock it in and then you build it at scale with purpose and speed.
I'll take more than 10. 4 years into Constellation class journey, a design that was 85% to the parent became 15% of the parent. So I don't think I can attribute that just to making it close to US standards. I think that's part of the cultural thing that I was talking about, that we need to shift away, and to their credit, SecBor and SecNav are saying the right things, that this is about doing things fast and many, and by definition they will need to address those elements so that you don't enter into those types of journeys anymore. So lessons learned, many of them, and happy to discuss, but it's about probably potentially going back to Dr. Herman's Freedom's Forge quote, that American technology will be driving American military. Because that was the period down back then. It's probably starting to be the period right now again. So we'll go back to that.
All right, ladies and gents, that was an excellent panel by our shipbuilders and moderated by Dr. Dombrowski. Just to start, the Foundry, the fleet is next. We're going to take a short break, but not before I offer each one of these gentlemen one of the highly vaunted coins from the Center for Maritime Strategy with our motto, Semper Invictus, because whether it's the Navy or shipbuilders, we will never be defeated. So thank you very much.